How's it going, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, we're going to be previewing and predicting Week 17 of the 2023 CFL season. Only 4 more weeks to go after this, and so let's get into it. So obviously, as we get towards the end of the season here, these games are starting to have a lot of playoff implications, and it's already starting to be do or die for some of these teams. So let's get into this week's slate, starting Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Late start for the first game of a doubleheader. We have the 12-1 Toronto Argonauts visiting the 10-4 Winnipeg Blue Bombers. In this game, would have had all the hype, but the only thing is that Toronto has locked up everything in terms of the standings, so they have nothing to play for, so therefore, they're resting their quarterback, Chad Kelly, and it would have been a matchup between the two leading MLP candidates, Kelly and Collaros, but unfortunately, because of the circumstances, we're not going to get that. We'll have to wait until perhaps the Grey Cup to see that matchup. So, we're going to see quarterback Cameron Duke start in place of Kelly in this one, and he's my player to watch for the Toronto Argonauts in this one. Did not look good in his one string of action so far this season in that game that Kelly left earlier this season against the Calgary Stampeders. So looking to see how he does in terms of being, the full-time starter this week. So we'll see how he does against a very good Winnipeg defense. Now, Winnipeg, on the other hand, is going to be looking for a win here. They're very much in the thick of a race for first place in the West. Next week, they play the BC Lions in BC to perhaps decide who gets first place in the West. But they need to win this game as well. So my player to watch here is linebacker Adam Bighill. Kind of a quiet season from Adam. I think that, last year he was very dynamic. I mean, probably the best linebacker in the CFL still. But I wouldn't say that he's been that level of player this year. I think he's been solid, but I don't think he's been that noticeable in terms of making big plays. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing if he can make a big play in this one and help Winnipeg get on the right side of this game. So in terms of who's going to win this game, I mean, it would have been very interesting if, Toronto had anything to play for, but I think Winnipeg, just a huge motivational edge, the quarterback situation being what it is for Toronto in this game. I got to go with Winnipeg to win 34-19, pretty comfortably at home, and go on to 11-4 on the season and give Toronto their second loss. Now moving on to the second end of our doubleheader on Friday night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we have the 6-8 Saskatchewan Roughriders visiting the 10-4 BC Lions, and this game has a lot of playoff implications. Obviously, like I said, BC's in a battle for first place with Winnipeg, so it's important for them. But Saskatchewan, if they win, this almost guarantees that they're going to make the playoffs this year. If they lose, then again, it opens the door for other teams like it did last week. But unfortunately, none of the other teams could make them pay for their loss last week against Ottawa. So big game for Saskatchewan, looking to bounce back after 3 very disappointing losses in a row. Now, in terms of the players I'm watching in this one, quarterback Jake Dolegala for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We've kind of seen these young quarterbacks that have came in and have started for some prolonged periods hit the wall this year at times because they look good for the first couple of games and then they go on a bit of a skid. So we saw that with Dustin Crum. We're starting to see a little bit of that with Taylor Powell in Hamilton as well. So we'll see if that continues for Jake Dolegala. 3 straight losses after winning his first 2 starts. One of those starts was against the BC Lions, but that one was at home. This one on the road in BC. Should be interesting to see how Dolegala plays in this one. Now, in terms of my player to watch for BC, it's defensive back TJ Lee. All over the field last week for Edmonton. I think he was arguably their best player other than maybe Matthew Betts last week. Just a very dynamic defensive back, has played there forever, just is very comfortable in that scheme, and I think that was a big story from last week was the return of the BC defense, so I'm interested to see how they play in this game because the last matchup we saw against Saskatchewan, they kind of got a little bit embarrassed compared to what we saw from them before that this season. So I think they're going to look for a big bounce back in this next matchup against Saskatchewan. Now, in terms of my pick for this game, I think that BC is rightfully the favorite, but I think Saskatchewan's going to come out pumped up, like I said, after those 3 straight losses. Very disappointing loss last week in Ottawa. So I think it's going to be a close game, but ultimately I'm going to take BC to win 27-21 and go to 11-4 on the season. Now moving on to our Saturday doubleheader, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have the 7-7 Montreal Alouettes visiting the 4-10 Ottawa Redblacks. And this game is pretty interesting because Ottawa is still technically alive in the playoff race. They would have to win this game, and they would have to win next week against Montreal as well to have any sort of a chance. But, I mean, they're still technically alive, and they came off a big win last week. So, very interested to see how the Redblacks play in this one. My players to watch, for Montreal, linebacker / defensive back Tyrese Beverette, kind of a great hybrid guy there in the linebacking core, but is a natural defensive back, I do believe. So he's played very, very well this season and last season for them. So I think he's a guy worth noting and one of the most underrated players in all of the CFL. And for Ottawa, it's defensive end Bryce Carter, who's having a breakout season. I believe he has 10 sacks on the season. He's a guy I talked about early in the season. If he could have a big season, Lorenzo Malden could build off what he did last year with the Most Outstanding Defensive Player award. So, that didn't really happen in terms of becoming a dynamic edge rushing duo. I think, guys have been in and out of the lineup, and Ottawa's defense hasn't been quite that good this year. I think the biggest problems are on the back end and the secondary, but I think Bryce Carter's had an excellent season, at least statistically, and I think he's going to play a big role in this one in terms of chasing after Cody Fajardo and limiting what he can do. Now for my pick for this game, I think that this game is interesting because these two teams have played two very competitive games, like I said earlier this season. But ultimately, I can't get around the trend that Montreal has lost every game to BC, Toronto, and Winnipeg this year, but is 7-0 against all the rest of the teams in the Canadian Football League. So I can't go against that trend. I'm going to take the Alouettes to win 21-16 on the road in Ottawa and get that much closer to a home playoff game. Now closing out Week 17 with perhaps the game of the week. 7 o'clock Eastern on Saturday night, we have the 4-10 Calgary Stampeders visiting the 6-8 Hamilton Tigercats. And you may look at the numbers in terms of records for both of these teams and say, how is that the game of the week? But I think this game has easily the most playoff implications in them. I think that, if Calgary wins this game, then they're still technically alive for the playoff race, especially if Saskatchewan loses to BC on Friday. That's a big part of their equation in terms of still being alive for the playoffs. And then for Hamilton, if they win this game, they're all but guaranteed a playoff spot this season. In fact, I think they can clinch this week if a few other results go their way. So very interested to see how this game plays out. It could mean a lot for either side. It could mean the end of Calgary's playoff streak effectively. So I'm very interested to see how it plays out Saturday night in Hamilton. I will be attending this game myself. Now, in terms of my players to watch for in this game, I'm going with running backs on either side. So for Calgary, I'm going with Kadeem Carey. Very quiet season for him after being a dominant running back the last couple of years in the CFL. So really excited to see if he can have a big game in this one. Calgary desperately needs it. It really seems like this team really struggles on offense if they don't have that consistent running game to build around. So Kadeem Carey, a big key for them in this one. And then for Hamilton, it's kind of the same thing. James Butler, he's kind of been the engine for the Ticats this season. When he's ran the ball well, it seems like they've had success, but otherwise, they haven't really had too much going on, I think, offensively in the games that he doesn't get going. So really excited to see if Butler or Carey have a big game in this one and can lead their team to victory. Now, in terms of my pick for this game, like I said, probably the hardest game to predict this week. I think that, there's so many implications, but my general feel is that Hamilton rolls in this game. I'm going to take the Ticats to win 31-21. I just think the Stampeders, they look cooked at this point. I don't think that they have much fight in them. I thought they were going to come out a lot more energized last week against Montreal, but laid a complete egg at home. I think they're done. I think this playoff streak is going to be coming to an end. So I think the Ticats have a lot more juice in them in this point, even though they lost last week against Toronto. I think they are kind of trending in a better direction than Calgary right now. So I'll take the Tigercats to win 31-21 at home and all but clinch a playoff spot. So that is just your preview for Week 17 of the 2023 CFL season. Be sure to let me know your picks down below. And with that said, hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.